Check it out, everybody. Kidsandart.org is where you will find Kids and Art, which is a California-based nonprofit and is our highlighted charity for this month on The Broken Brain. As you know, we highlight a charity every month, and this month it is Kids and Art. They're helping pediatric cancer patients through the arts, through art education, art activities, through advocacy and education. They work with children who have been diagnosed and under treatment for cancer, which is obviously a great mission and something that is out there. They've been going since 2008. They are based in California, but have spread their programs nationwide within the U.S., and you really ought to know them. Kidsandart.org to learn more about them, to get involved and support them. Also, if you happen to join the Broken Brains Patreon membership and support the show, then 50% of your donation will always go to Kids and Art, the organization, as well as is true for every highlighted charity that is in the month. The month that you join, your donations will go 50% to them for as long as you keep donating to the whole thing, as well as the bonus materials and helping the podcast to stay afloat out here in podcast land. So thanks, everybody. And now on to my interview with Travis Wood and Alex Mallis, who are the writers and directors of the great new film, Travel Companion.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Broken Brain. We're here once again to look at the intersection of psychology and culture, and we've got a great insight into that today. I'm Dwight, of course, your host, and I am joined today by Travis Wood and Alex Mallis, who are the writers and directors of the new film Travel Companion. This is a really interesting film that I'm very excited to dig into. It made its premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2025, and it is going into a national release starting this Friday as of recording, which is the 10th, and at BAM in New York, and then you're going out throughout the release into, well, you can share if you want, like as far as where it is. But thank you, Travis and Alex. I'm really grateful for you being here today.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Dwight.
Is it it's going into national release within the U.S.? Is that the plan? Or the happy?
Yeah, we're happy to be bringing the film to quite a few cities. The easiest way is to just go to our website, thetravelcompanionfilm.com. It's going to be in Chicago, LA, Minneapolis, Burlington, Vermont, Sedona, Arizona, Diocese Chicago. Where else, Travis? You're better at
Cincinnati. Yeah, there's a lot of cities on there.
Nice. Yeah, it's exciting to see it go out. It's the kind of movie I have a real soft spot for the kinds of movies where there are things that are happening that very much match into the way that we see things like relationship dynamics and those kinds of things come into play. And we're gonna talk about that. But the story, as the description of the film, I'll throw this out there, and you guys can maybe you wrote it, who knows? But you can chip in and say if this is one that you like. Struggling documentarian Simon relies on the unique perk of his roommate and best friend Bruce's airline job, free flights, as his travel companion. And then how's that for a start, you guys? It goes on. I want to let you guys say more about it, but that's the framework that we're getting into, right?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. I've kind of been describing it as like an independent filmmaker who has free flights starts to spiral out when he might lose them to his buddy's new girlfriend.
Yes. There you go. And the core right away that we get into is that we're looking at a relationship, and we're looking at it hit me that this was, to me, almost like a character study with a real strong relationship components. I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but that's what I thought when I was watching it. What would you guys say about how you approached creating the character and the relationships in the film?
Yeah, I think we started looking in the mirror. That was probably the first place we looked. It's a film that's very much based off our own lives and experiences, kind of like an amalgamation and then, an expansion upon a lot of the stuff that we as filmmakers have gone through. And then certainly we as, young men have gone through in terms of relationships. I think that there is like I was saying this the other day. There's like kind of a cliche in horror films where it's like if they just had cell phones, the film would end in 5 minutes, or
Right.
30 seconds. And similarly, we kind of feel like if the characters in our film would just like talk to each other, the film would end in 1 minute as well. Like if they would just use their skills, their emotional maturity, if they had emotional maturity to the extent that they could talk to each other, things might go a lot differently than they did, I think. So in that way, the film is sort of reflective of this millennial phenomenon of maybe being like really comfortable around each other and having great camaraderie, but sometimes not exactly saying the thing that you want to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one of the things that I really admire when there's a balance of any film that where relationships play a really key part, is that I feel like you ought to be watching it and saying, oh, come on, just say this. And then yet they don't. And in a way that makes sense. Because there's the ways that don't make sense, where it's like, I got to tell you something. Well, I'm in a hurry, but I got to tell you something. Sorry, there's no time. With 5 exchanges later, it's like, just say it. But that kind of thing doesn't work as much. But then when you see someone who's like, oh, they just left the room. Hey, you should text, follow them next morning, whatever. It would just say this and it would really help. But yet it really represents the way that people do not. It's like, if I got myself in this pickle in the first place, maybe I don't have the skills to go back and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I was being a real jerk. Even if that sounds simple, the communication problems I felt in your film were very realistic in that, yeah, that could have helped, but they're not going to do it. It would almost seem weird if Simon would have all of a sudden shown that social awareness. At least that was the viewer experience for me.
Yeah, I think I would just add that like one other element that Travis and I talked about a lot is this idea in the film of old friendships that maybe are from another place in life and another, a lifetime ago. For example, in the film, these guys are childhood friends. And when they became friends, they were coming up together. They were learning the world together. They were going through high school, whatever. And now they're in New York City, and maybe their paths have diverged in such a way that they might, we like to say if they had met now, they might not have been friends, but they're like friends through circumstance, friends through history. And through that, I think the pitfall of that kind of relationship is that there are a lot of assumptions about what the other person is thinking and the other person is feeling. And that can definitely lead to conflict.
Yeah. A fiction where you have people who are childhood buddies, oftentimes when I watch things like that, it's like, wow, that is such a friendship. Who has that? And you guys address the dynamic that doesn't often come out, which is evolving personalities in a friendship that's like, we know each other super well, and there's a feeling of obligation to be forever buddies. And I think what we see here is the rare example of this kind of growing apart, especially as perhaps one person is evolving into a different phase, different chapter of his life. You've got Simon's roommate, Bruce, if I got the name right. I didn't have it in front of me. Who is, pursuing a relationship. This relationship is maturing. He's very invested in it. And at the same time, Simon, it seems to me in the film, he seems pretty intent on things staying how they are. Not just the benefit of the airplane tickets that he gets, but it just felt like his whole personality was, I don't want things to change at all, ever, anywhere. I'm curious if that's what you guys thought about that as creating this character.
Yeah, absolutely. He's really just wanting not change, which I guess is kind of inverse to a movie. Usually the character wants to change, but he's kind of fighting to stay the same. And so even as we were working on what his movie he's making within the movie, we were like, oh yeah, it's kind of this thing that he's always wanting to be working on. Like there's maybe not even a desire to fully finish it and realize it. So in some ways he's like comfortable being held back with things being in idea mode versus in like a more tangible mode. So it's like only once he kind of has to accept one change can he kind of let that spread throughout his life in a hopefully positive way.
So even the change that you would say should be just a slam dunk, he wants his career to move forward. He wants his art to get done. He's not really, he's that maybe that one more fear and anxiety. If I invest in that, did you find that was part of it?
I think so. Exactly. Like the very obvious thing that he needs is to move forward with his art, finish his film. But the idea of the film, the potential of the film is almost more exciting and certainly less risky than actually doing the thing. If he starts to shoot and edit and, see rough cuts and whatever, it's going to be different than that perfect image he had in his head of what it might be. And that's scary for him. And he's not facing that.
I wondered about the element of this. It seemed like his project was one that he was having. It was very niche. Seemed to have a very hard time explaining to people what it was. You got the vibe that the more he talked about it, the more people went from interest to humoring him, of not really getting it. It seemed like that was something that I'm curious if that's something that as creators you've run into, either that anxiety or trying to relate a project to people. What's that like? What inspired that for you guys?
Yeah, I think we were just also pulled from ourselves. I mean, I feel like that is totally me and a lot of other filmmakers, where you're just kind of describing something so much and so often, and it's morphing, and you're not totally sure what it is, but you always want to have an answer to that question of like, what are you working on? And I feel like the other day I was like looking back at an email for like an old project, and I was like, man, I was just describing this completely differently to everyone as months and months went on. And, it just kind of shifts in more, especially with a doc too, because sometimes you are really trying to find the thing as you're making it.
Yeah, I would add like sometimes when someone asks you what you're working on or you have an opportunity to talk about the project, you almost use that as an opportunity to figure it out in real time. It's not like you're tapping into this perfect answer and regurgitating it. You're actually sort of like faking that as you're like kind of talking about it in real time. And I think we really tried to kind of capture some of that energy in the way that Simon, played by Tristan Turner, talks about the project, where you can kind of see in his face. He's like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And you can see like that's the part he loves. He loves the feeling of like firing synapses and connecting ideas. That's the project for him. It almost lives in that space more than anywhere else.
Well, when you're involved in a passion project or a creative endeavor, I've noticed the same thing where it's like, oh, I'm in here every day. And for those listening just the audio version, I just tapped my head there. I'm living in my brain every day, and I have 50 million thoughts about something that I care about. And occasionally, especially for some of us, it's hard to talk about it without trying to say all of them in the one conversation. One thing that hit me as well is there were a couple of things that Simon kept running into. And one of them is it seems like every other person he bumps into is also involved in creative endeavors and has aspirations and things that, that in that circles in which he moves, or even just random people that bump into him and say, you have a camera? I do film. I do art,
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that's a very New York phenomenon, I think, living in the city. People move here, and people are grow up here around the arts, and everybody seems to be working on something. It's a place that people, hustle and realize their dreams. And in the film, we kind of wanted to, we saw it as like, it's subtle, but a juxtaposition between Simon, this guy who loves talking about his projects, but isn't exactly moving forward. And he's surrounded by people who seem to be moving forward without all of the roadblocks he puts up, especially one of the characters he runs into on the street who sees that he's holding a photo camera and he has a project he wants to do right then and there. There's nothing stopping that guy. He's like, I want to do it right now. I don't care. I have no inhibitions. And that we felt was a nice juxtaposition against the blocks that Simon is constantly creating for himself.
And it seemed like it lent itself to oftentimes when people have those self-imposed obstacles, or even the imposter syndrome, as people use that term, I feel like that can lead to resentment, where it's like, oh, here's someone, instead of there's, camaraderie. And even with his roommate's girlfriend, who is a filmmaker, there's a feeling of like, oh, I like you as a person, you're dating my best friend, but I kind of resent you.
Yeah, exactly. I think he is maybe in denial about the resentment that he might feel about the people around him. Yeah, that's an apt observation.
One of the things that hit me as well about this character is, as we're watching him go through, he has a lot of self-doubt and he's not moving forward in certain ways. I did think it was interesting, though, that he obviously was someone who had talent, who had passion, and at least to me, it seemed like he had a certain amount of success in that he was doing some professional work. It just wasn't the kind of work that he wished he was doing. That he did have some friendships and opportunities to bond, but at the same time, wasn't maybe accepting sort of what he was running into. And there's a line from one of the individuals in the film. I think, in fact, it's the one you mentioned that he meets on the street, who basically says, it's not about what you want. You have to appreciate what you got. And it seemed to me that that was a big part of Simon, the protagonist's, maybe his problems of where he was getting in his own way by not appreciating where he was succeeding or the things he had.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think he wants these things, but is really, I think, it's like a bit jealous, I guess, and a bit not willing to put in that work and that effort and take that last step. So I think ultimately, he ends up being lost, not appreciating these things that he maybe did want once upon a time. And, I think even this character's job, we pulled that from Alex, he had this taxi job. And so you are kind of feeling like you're on the fringes of the industry. So even though you are kind of doing it, you're like, I deserve better. I need to be higher on the totem pole. So I think Beatrice is where he sees himself, or where at least he thinks he should be, even if he hasn't necessarily put in the work to get there. Like, he wants to be directing the big commercial set. He doesn't want to be filming the taxis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for Alex, then, if that's reflective of a job that you had, I imagine there must be a particular frustration in being like, I'm in my industry. I'm not like, how do I get to where I'd like to be? I think that crosses many industries.
It's actually it's extremely close to home. My first job in the city in video was doing that. I was working for this ad agency, this sort of middleman, and they put the ads in the taxis, and I would go out and film them so they could show the client, here's all your ads out in the world. And occasionally they would get bigger jobs. And one of those jobs was in Park City, Utah, at the Sundance Film Festival. So there I was, headed to Sundance, and I was in Park City walking around on the streets with a little handheld video camera, trying to capture these vehicles, these wrapped vehicles with ads on them. And I have this really, this memory of being on the kind of Main Street, whatever, and seeing another buddy I knew from New York who had a big proper camera and a producer and a boom, and he was doing documentary stuff like for the festival. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like a big commercial or whatever, but it was like he had a proper setup, and he was like, "Oh, hey, like, what's up, Al?" I was like, hey, like, I had this little dinky camera in my hand, and it was really kind of emasculating and really indicative. Really symbolic in a very literal way of where I saw myself and where I wanted to be and what I felt like I deserved versus what I was getting. And we definitely wanted to infuse some of that energy into Simon.
There's that scene right in the film where he literally comes across, in this case, Beatrice, who is his roommate's girlfriend, doing exactly kind of what you said at a high level. So that's a real recreation of that feeling. And in this case, Simon eventually begins to lash out towards her in sort of passive aggressive ways.
Yeah, I think Simon, at least in my head, Simon does respect her and does even like her. I think it's he's so focused on himself. His inability to sort of account for the people around him and imagine what other people might want, that he doesn't necessarily recognize the impact of his behavior. So him going to her set and talking to her and making the requests that he doesn't see anything wrong with that. And in fact, he walks away from that scene thinking like, great, that went well. When anybody who watches it are like, are you crazy?
I literally wrote a note down. Oh, where is it? I literally wrote a note down that says he walked away thinking something good happened. There we go. After that conversation where he, interrupts her and keeps talking about this obsession that he has of trying to make sure she does not take his place of getting free tickets from his roommate.
Right.
Yeah.
He has this thing where he feels like everything that he's doing is the right thing to do. It's not that he's not thoughtful. It's just that he's having the wrong thoughts. He's not acting on impulse. He's thoughtful, and he thinks that what he's doing is right. And in some ways, what he's doing is not all that crazy. Like, I think we wanted Simon's character to not be this like total asshole. We wanted him to be doing things that were relatable and empathetic, and like he is struggling and he is trying to get ahead, and this is his best friend that he does care about, even if he's not able to show it. And Beatrice is killing it, and she does have these jobs, and maybe she doesn't need these flights. So it's like we really wanted to have this world where everybody had a stake, everybody had a claim that what they were doing was right. It made it more interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, it definitely makes it more interesting because, once again, I think that's more realistic of what people do run into. And there's a scene that what you're describing from my experience watching it is there's the dialogue where he's talking to both of them and they're getting annoyed because he's being annoying. And then he says, "What? I'm just asking questions about my best friends." And he seems legitimately surprised when they say, "We're your best friends because you're treating us like an asshole." And he's like, "What the?" It seemed like he legitimately was surprised by that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the character's core, he doesn't believe that asking a question, that there's anything wrong with that. Like, as long as you're asking, it's like that is fair game. And I think like that basically leads him to these foot in the mouth situations like over and over.
Especially when someone said, "Stop asking me that question" a bunch of times. Right.
Yeah. And we also, I think when we were writing it and making it, we wanted to leave space for scenes that we don't see, interactions that are not part of the film. For example, that scene you're describing, there's a bunch of stuff that might have happened in between the previous scene and that one. A conversation they might have had where he's like, "Hey man, I really feel this way." And Simon, "Oh yeah, totally. I totally get it. I totally get it." And like him thinking that everything is now, good to go, but clearly it's not. So he's not letting go of something, even if he thinks he is.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask you guys was the title, obviously, Travel Companion. It refers to this perk that Bruce has in his job and it's literally called a travel companion. Seems like it's something that is intended to share, standby flight status with like a close family member or even partner. And I'm curious, what was it that led you to use that dynamic to showcase this whole relationship evolution, to say, hey, you got just kind of the airline feature for it. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so at the time of writing this, I had travel standby benefits through a friend. And I was with Alex at a festival and I was kind of telling him like, "Oh man, my buddy's got a new girlfriend. I think this is it. I could lose him right here." And he just thought that was so funny that we ended up kind of running with it from there.
It's an interesting thing that I sort of tangentially knew existed. I knew airline employees could get some credits and things, but the specific identity of like, this is my person, and being like, my person is drifting to another person, and having that be an awkward, I mean, could potentially, especially with these personalities in the story, more awkward than maybe it could be, or needed to be, but at the same time, struck me as one of those things that could be very awkward, even if it doesn't, need to be or whatever. And
making the film, we've been hearing from a lot of flight attendants and people in the airline industry at, before after screenings, that they're like, "Oh yeah, I had a situation like this. Something, chaotic happened around my travel benefits."
Man. And I, once again, had never thought about that conflict, but it makes a lot of sense right away. And yeah, it seemed to me to be a great shorthand to be like, "Oh, something's happening," that is going to be awkward. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys talking about this and letting me watch it as well. And as always with great art, I'm grateful for you guys creating it so that we can all see it and learn from it. If anybody can come across Travel Companion as it's coming through your area, then you really, really should. Especially if you're the type of person who has ever had a relationship of any kind with any person on Earth. So, which I think that encompasses most people. If you are not in that group, you're probably not listening. You probably don't have Wi-Fi and not listening to this. But what can you tell people about? You mentioned they should follow it at your website. Let's mention that again to everybody and say what and anything you'd like to say about what's coming next with the film.
Yes, the best place to learn more about the film is at our website, thetravelcompanionfilm.com. And equally, if you're on Instagram, it's our handle is the Travel Companion Film, and that's where we're posting screening info, upcoming opportunities to catch the film, and just like we have a whole meet the cast and crew profile thing going on there. So if you want to see like behind the scenes and learn more, our Instagram, the Travel Companion Film, is a great place to do that. It's launching this Friday, April 10th at BAM in New York City for a week-long run, followed by a limited national release in lots of cities and towns across the country. So once again, thetravelcompanionfilm.com is where to learn more.
And is that where we would watch for, larger distribution method as well? Is that what we should check for?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to stay in touch about the film and our ultimate digital release, which will probably be sometime in early fall, to catch it streaming, the Travel Companion Film is the best place to do that.
Well, thank you again, guys, for being here and for all your hard work in the arts.
Thank you.
So
Great
much.
interview.